I ruined my relationship and I don't know how to fix it. I, 26, cheated on my partner, 27, and I genuinely don't know what to do now. Okay, so I guess I'm writing this to get everything out and to understand where things went wrong and where my patterns became the most obvious. In November, I went through an extremely traumatic breakup with a previous partner. A few days later, I added a guy, 27, I knew from high school on Instagram, and he followed me back. We started talking, FaceTiming, Snapchatting, pretty constant communication. At the same time, I was also using dating apps and going on dates, but eventually the guy from high school and I started getting more serious, although it was still very casual at first. In December, things escalated quickly, and we became officially together. I was spending most of my time at his place. We were both not really stable at the time, both unemployed for a period, and things in general were a bit chaotic. He started working at a restaurant and asked me to start doing delivery apps so I could help out financially, since he was often the one covering most expenses. During this period, there were already unhealthy patterns forming: lack of structure, poor communication, and dependency on unhealthy coping habits. He also asked me to take his cousin, 26 Yem, along during some delivery runs so he could get out of the house and clear his head. That's when I started spending time with his cousin. Over time, his cousin and I became close friends. My boyfriend was busy working, so I would usually be out with his cousin during the day. During these interactions, personal conversations came up, including past relationships and mutual connections. At one point, I reconnected with a close friend from high school, 24, after realizing she was connected to his cousin's past relationship story. We hadn't spoken in years, but we reconnected quickly and became close again. At this point, my social circle became very intertwined with my boyfriend's family and friends, and things started getting complicated emotionally and socially. Meanwhile, our relationship at home was already becoming unstable. There were trust issues, emotional reactions, and a growing pattern of avoidance instead of communication. I was also dealing with my own personal struggles and unhealthy coping mechanisms at the time, which made everything worse. Eventually, my boyfriend started going through serious personal and legal issues related to relapse and past behavior. This deeply affected both of us emotionally. I was also dealing with heavy emotional stress from my own family situation and past trauma, which made me even more unstable mentally. As things escalated, I gave him an ultimatum about honesty and communication, which only pushed us further apart. I can now see that instead of supporting him properly, I was reacting out of fear and frustration. Eventually, after an argument, he said, "This isn't working," and I took it as a breakup moment and blocked him out of anger. Later, I realized there was a misunderstanding, but by then things had already escalated emotionally. After that, we went through an on and off cycle, reconnecting, breaking up, unblocking, blocking again. He kept trying to reach me, and I kept avoiding direct communication. At some point, he told me there was a possibility he might face serious legal consequences, and asked me to break things off if that happened because he couldn't do it himself. That situation emotionally overwhelmed me, and instead of facing it properly, I became avoidant and inconsistent. Around this time, I made another very poor decision. I became involved with someone else while still emotionally tied to my relationship. I justified it to myself at the time, thinking the relationship was already ending, but now I see that it was still betrayal. A few days later, he entered a rehabilitation program and became unavailable for contact. During that time, I continued making unhealthy choices, reconnecting with past people, and creating even more emotional confusion in my life. I also started living a double life in a way, pretending things were simpler than they were, while internally everything was falling apart. I told different versions of the truth to different people just to avoid consequences or confrontation. Eventually, I started sending him letters while he was away, telling him I still loved him and that I was waiting for him. But at the same time, I was still involved with other people and continuing the same patterns. When he came out of treatment, I avoided seeing him and eventually cut contact again instead of facing the truth. He tried to reach me, but but I kept avoiding accountability. At that point, I also began speaking negatively about him to others, painting him in a worse light, and sharing only selective parts of the story that made me look better. I can fully admit now that this was wrong. Eventually, everything collapsed when someone close to me exposed parts of the situation to him. He found out the truth about multiple things I had hidden, and everything came crashing down at once. There were weeks of chaos, arguments, emotional conversations, and complete breakdown of trust. At this point, the relationship that once existed was gone. Now, we are separated, but still emotionally entangled. He is deeply hurt, and I fully understand why. I have started therapy, and I am trying to take responsibility for my actions instead of running from them. I am finally seeing how my avoidance, dishonesty, fear of abandonment, and emotional instability created this entire situation. I hurt someone who loved me, and I also hurt myself deeply in the process. Right now, I don't know if this relationship can be fixed, but I know I cannot continue living in denial or avoiding accountability. I genuinely want to understand if I can ever repair the damage I caused, or if the healthiest thing is to fully let go. All I know is, I don't want to be this version of myself anymore.